The rice was still warm when they left it on my doorstep in a flimsy plastic container. No note, no knock, not even a hurried goodbye. I opened the door, and there it sat, like an apology. No one dared to say aloud. I stared at it for a long time before I picked it up. The steam still floated in the afternoon light, curling around the edges of my silence, like incense in a church. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just held the container like it might answer a question I hadn't dared ask out loud. Was this love? Was this what it had all come down to? There was a time not so long ago, really, when meals meant laughter, when I cooked 3 dishes at once, because one child hated onions, another adored fish, and the youngest only ever wanted fried egg with too much soy sauce. I remember juggling pots and pans with music playing, voices rising and falling in that chaotic harmony only families can manage. And now I heated up someone else's effort and sat at my small table alone, pretending the gesture filled me the way a conversation used to. I don't need their support. That's not the point. I never raised them so they'd feel indebted to me. I never folded their laundry or packed their lunches expecting gold coins in return. But I did hope quietly, secretly, that I'd still matter, that someone, just one of them, might still look into my eyes and see the woman, not just the role, that maybe someone would stop by with a meal and stay long enough to ask me how my day was, or better yet, ask if I'd eaten like I used to ask them every single night. When they were children, I asked that question with my whole heart. It meant, are you okay? Do you feel safe? Did the world treat you kindly today? But when they ask me on rare days, they remember it's different. It's rushed. It's something they say on the way out of a conversation. Oh, and did you eat, Mom? I nod and say yes, even if I haven't. What's the point of telling the truth when there's no time for the answer? That afternoon, I sat down and opened the container. The rice was soft. The pork was a little dry. The vegetables had wilted in their own steam. But I ate every bite slowly, as if pretending I'd cooked it myself. I even thanked them out loud, though no one was there. Just an old woman at a table for one, whispering gratitude into a room filled with ghosts of dinners past. I used to tell myself it was enough that their lives were busy, that the world was harsh, and that they didn't mean to forget. But then I realized forgetting isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as quiet as a plastic box left on the step. Sometimes it's as soft as not knocking. Sometimes it's warm rice gone cold because you waited too long hoping someone might come in and eat with you. There was a little soy sauce left at the bottom, pooling like old tears. I dipped the last spoonful in it and swallowed. The taste was familiar, salty, sharp, comforting in its own sad way. I placed the empty container in the sink and washed it gently like it mattered, like I'd keep it just in case they came back and needed something to carry leftovers home in. That night, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't want the noise. I sat by the window and watched the shadows move across the wall, soft and slow, like time exhaling. I didn't feel angry. Not quite. Just empty in a way that's hard to name. Like something inside had settled too deep, too still to be stirred again. I think the worst part isn't being forgotten. It's being remembered in pieces, a drop-off, a text, a transfer, like care can be outsourced, like love can be scheduled. But the truth is, I don't want much. Just a voice at the door. Just one question asked with warmth. Just one moment where I don't feel like a task to be checked off. I used to believe that love showed itself in grand gestures, the big gifts, the hospital visits, the birthdays remembered. But now I know it hides in the smallest things. The way they say your name, the way they linger, the way they ask, "Have you eaten?" And wait, actually wait for the answer. They don't ask how I am anymore. Not really. They'll say, You good in that rushed, distracted tone, like it's a toll they pay to cross the bridge of obligation. But they don't wait for the answer. They never do. Sometimes I want to lie just to see if they'd notice. Say something like, "No, I'm not," and let the silence stretch. Let it hang like a damp sheet over their guilt. But I never do. Because I've learned that silence protects more than it hurts, and I've grown used to their hurry. Their lives are so full, and I've become the space between. There's a special kind of ache in becoming invisible. I used to be the center of their world, the one who knew where everything was, who made the decisions, who remembered their appointments and their allergies, and which child had nightmares and which one hated thunderstorms. I kept all of that in my heart, like a mother keeps secrets tightly wrapped, always ready. Now I'm just the old woman they check in on like you check the locks before going to bed, a habit, not a connection. Last week, one of them stopped by. Just for a few minutes, they said. I'd been boiling water to make tea jasmine their favorite when they were little, and by the time it steeped, they were already standing at the door keys in hand, mine somewhere else. I offered them a cup. They declined, said they had a meeting. I stood there holding 2 cups of warmth, one growing cold, the other untouched. I smiled and said, "Next time, like I always do." But I knew there wouldn't be a next time. Not soon. Not for tea. After they left, I sat with both cups. I drank mine slowly. Let the steam rise up and kiss my face. The other cup I left untouched, just to feel like someone was still there with me. I do that more than I should. 2 sets of chopsticks, 2 napkins. It's a foolish ritual maybe, but it gives shape to the emptiness. And sometimes pretending is easier than accepting. I know I'm not alone in this. I've seen it in the eyes of other women, at the pharmacy, in the slow, lonely way they push their carts through the aisles, pausing at things they'll never buy. We all wear that same quiet look, a softness that used to be love, worn down to memory. Our hearts stretch thin, from giving still reaching even though no one is reaching back. I don't blame them, my children. I really don't. The world is different now. People rush more love faster, forget easier. I don't think they mean to be distant. It just happens, like rust on metal, slow, quiet, until one day everything creaks. Sometimes I want to tell them who I used to be. Not the mother, not the cook, the nurse, the teacher, the one who stayed up when they were sick or worried or foolish. No, I want to tell them about me, the woman I was before they were born, the girl who danced in the rain, who loved poetry, and had dreams of becoming something more than a name in someone else's phone. But I don't, because when I speak, they look at me like I'm speaking a language they've forgotten how to hear. It's strange to feel like a stranger in a house you built, to walk through rooms where your voice used to echo with purpose, and now it just fades against the walls. I dust the photo frames, not because they're dusty, but because touching them is the closest I come to touching them. The worst is when they say, "You're so strong, Mom," as if that's a comfort, as if that strength hasn't cost me everything. I don't want to be strong anymore. I want to be soft. I want to be seen. I want someone to ask, not out of duty, but out of care. "How are you, Mom, really?" And then stay long enough to hear what I say next. The truth is, I don't expect their time. I know the world pulls at them in 100 directions, but words those don't take long. A kind question, a slow answer, a real pause in their day just for me. That's all I ever wanted. Not money, not favors, just presence. Just that small, sacred moment where I feel like more than background noise. Tonight, I'll pour another cup of tea. I'll sit by the window and listen to the wind scratch against the glass. Maybe tomorrow someone will call. Maybe not. But I'll still be here, I'll still ask myself the question they don't. How are you? And I'll answer it softly, with all the love I've still got left. The phone rings sometimes, wrong numbers, salespeople, machines pretending to be people, but each time my heart skips just a little, just enough to remind me it still wants something, just enough to betray the part of me that still hopes. I reach for it with a strange urgency, already picturing their names on the screen, but it's never them, not lately. And when it is, it's short, functional. The kind of call that feels like a chore, someone just crossed off a list. I used to wait by the phone. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. There was a time I memorized their schedules. I knew when their workday ended, when they'd be driving, when they might be free. I'd sit by the window with the phone nearby, not in my hand, not staring at it, but close enough to answer on the first ring. Close enough to pretend I wasn't waiting. But days turned into weeks, and the phone grew quieter. I started noticing how loud the house is when it's full of nothing. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the old wall clock, the wind slipping under the door. I never realized silence had so many voices. Now it's all I hear. I stopped keeping it by my side. I leave it in another room, now let the battery die, sometimes forget where I last put it. If they do call, I'll call back. Maybe. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll let them wonder what that feels like to reach out and hear nothing. It's not revenge. I'm not that kind of mother. It's more like self-preservation. Because hope, when it's not returned, becomes its own kind of cruelty. You start questioning your worth, your memory, whether you ever truly mattered or if you were just a station they passed through on the way to somewhere else. Once I didn't hear the phone ring because I was in the garden. I'd been digging around the roots of my lemon tree, the one that never bore fruit, but still grew beautiful leaves. I missed the call by 10 minutes. When I called back, they didn't answer. Later, I got a text. Never mind. Just wanted to ask something. That was it. Just wanted to ask. Not, how are you? Not, I miss you. Just something. Like I'm a service line. A walking archive of their childhoods and recipes, and how to fix a broken zipper. It makes you wonder, when did I become someone they only reach for when they need something? And yet I still answer. I always do. Because love doesn't know how to hold back even when it's tired. Because even when my heart is worn thin from years of giving, it still beats with the hope that maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time they'll stay on the line a little longer. Maybe this time they'll ask, "What did you do today, Mom?" and mean it. But that hope, it's fragile now. I tuck it away most days like a cracked photo frame I'm afraid to touch. I don't speak of it to anyone. Who would understand? Other mothers, maybe. The ones who smile politely in public and cry quietly in kitchens. The ones who say, "I'm fine," when they're anything but. The ones who used to be the sun around which little lives revolved and now orbit in silence. The phone sits beside me now as I write this in my mind. Silent. Still. Like an old dog that used to bark, but now only lifts its head when the wind changes. I don't expect it to ring. I won't flinch if it does. That part of me, the one that jumped at every buzz, is softer now, more careful, more tired. And if one of them does call tomorrow or next week, I'll answer. I'll ask them how they are. I always do. Because that's what I've always wanted in return. A mirror, a moment, a voice saying, "I thought of you." Not because they needed something, just because I matter. Still, that's the thing. They never tell you about motherhood. It never ends. But the phone calls do. And when they stop, it's not noise you miss. It's not the conversation. It's what it means that you were remembered, that you were loved, if only for a minute. The grocery store used to be a battlefield of decisions: which snacks they'd finish, which fruit they'd leave to rot, which brand of cereal came with the best toy. I used to move through those aisles with purpose lists in hand, prices, memorized habits formed around their ever-changing tastes. Now I walk through slowly sometimes, without buying anything at all, just remembering. The fluorescent lights are too bright for eyes like mine now. I squint at labels not because I can't read them, but because I'm not in a hurry. No one's waiting for me to get back. No one's texting, "Don't forget the eggs." I take my time because time is all I have. Last week in the frozen food section, I saw a woman around my age, maybe a little younger, shopping with her daughter. They weren't talking much, just softly arguing over what kind of soup to buy. But even in that there was closeness. The kind of closeness I remember from years ago. The daughter rolled her eyes playfully, and the mother nudged her gently with the cart, and for just a second my throat tightened, like it was holding back years. I turned away before the sting reached my eyes. It's not envy, not exactly. It's more like longing without a name. That quiet ache of being witness to something you used to have, not with bitterness, but with tenderness, like you're watching a younger version of yourself from behind glass. I smiled at them as I passed, and they didn't notice. Why would they? I was just another old woman, pushing a half-empty cart. I picked up a pack of tofu. I didn't need it, but one of my daughters used to love it when I fried it crisp with scallions and soy sauce. She'd sneak pieces from the pan before they hit the plate, laughing, her fingers greasy, her joy infectious. I bought it anyway. Maybe I'd make it for myself. Maybe I'd just let it sit in the fridge like the other things I keep buying out of memory instead of appetite. I passed by the snack aisle, the one where they used to run ahead and grab colorful bags, pleading eyes turning to me, bargaining with chores they'd never do. I'd give in, of course. I always did. That aisle still smells like those days, sweet fake full of echoes. I don't linger too long. Sometimes I find myself talking to the cashier too much. Just a little. Just long enough to feel like someone has seen me, noticed me. The young ones are polite but distracted. The older ones, the ones with tired eyes like mine, they understand. There's always a moment between us, quiet but real, a recognition, a nod between women who once were needed. I carry my own bags now, carefully balanced so I don't strain my back. No one offers to help. That's fine. I've grown strong in the silence. But sometimes I wonder what it would feel like to walk out of the store and see one of them waiting, leaning on the car, smiling, saying, "Let me take that, Mom, just once, just for the memory." Instead, I ride the bus home, sit by the window and let the scenery blur. The tofu shifts in the bag, and I rest my hand over it gently like I'm holding something fragile. Maybe I am. Back home, I unpack slowly. Everything has a place. Every shelf knows my hands. I put the tofu in the fridge. I glance at the calendar on the wall. Blank squares. No birthdays marked, no visits planned. Just days. Dinner is simple. A small bowl of rice. Steamed greens. 1 egg. I could have made more. But who would eat it? I think about calling one of them, just to say hello. Just to hear a voice that carries part of my own. But I don't. I imagine their busy meetings, errands, other people. I tell myself it's better not to intrude. Instead, I whisper the words, "They don't, I miss you." Not into the phone, but into the air, into the quiet hum of my kitchen. I say it softly the way I used to say goodnight, when they were already half asleep. The way I used to kiss their foreheads and smooth their hair even when they didn't know. I eat, I clean up, I wrap the leftovers no one will eat, and I sit for a while just breathing, just being, And even though no one asked, yes, yes, I've eaten. But oh, what I would give for someone to ask it and mean it, not out of duty, not as a reflex, but from that deep-rooted place we used to call home. It was my birthday last month. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't mark it on the calendar. I didn't remind them. Part of me wanted to see if they'd remember on their own, not from a phone alert or a social media prompt, but from their hearts. I suppose that was naive. Or maybe just quietly hopeful in the way mothers often are even after disappointment has built a permanent home behind their ribs. The day passed like any other. I swept the porch. I warmed leftover soup. I fed the birds and watched them hop around like they owned the garden. I told myself it didn't matter. Birthdays are just dates after all. But there was a silence to that day that felt heavier than usual, not just around me, but inside, like my body remembered before my mind did, like my heart kept waiting for something, a message, a call, a knock that never came. There was a year when they all came home just for cake. The living room was full of shoes and laughter and too many opinions about frosting. They gave me handmade cards, off-key singing little gifts they'd picked with wide eyes and sticky fingers. That was when they were small. That was when I was more than a calendar entry. Now I don't expect gifts. I don't even expect visits. But a call, a single line, "Happy birthday, Mom." That's all. It doesn't take much to make a person feel like they still belong somewhere. But the phone didn't ring. Not that day. Not the day after. I checked it a few times just in case I missed it. I hadn't. It sat on the table like a mirror of my solitude, too still, too quiet. So I made myself a cup of tea, lit a single candle left over from an old box of decorations, and whispered, "Happy birthday to no one." I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. Tears used to come easily. Now they're more selective. They wait for deeper wounds. This birthday, wasn't sharp. It was dull, like a bruise that keeps fading but never disappears. The next week, one of them called. Not to say sorry, not to apologize for forgetting. They didn't even mention the date, just asked if I had the old recipe for that pork dish. I gave it to them word for word, holding back the part of me that wanted to scream, "Did you remember?" But I didn't. What would be the point? Guilt isn't love, and I didn't want a call that came only because they felt bad. I want to be remembered not out of habit or history, but because I'm still here, still breathing, still hoping, still deserving. That night I made myself a slice of cake. Nothing fancy, just something sweet, something that felt like a hand reaching toward myself. I sang the song under my breath. It sounded strange, just one voice, but I sang it anyway, because if I don't celebrate me, who will? I think that's what gets lost, not the big gestures, but the small acknowledgements. The way people used to look at me and smile for no reason. The way my children used to rush into my arms just because I was there. Now if they look at all, it's with distracted eyes checking their phones behind my shoulder. I've become part of the scenery, something they pass on the way to something else. It's hard to explain that kind of loneliness. It's not loud. It doesn't scream or demand. It just sits there quietly, weaving itself into your mornings, your meals, your sleep. You carry it like a second skin. You learn how to smile with it. You learn how to speak around it. But sometimes, like on that birthday, it becomes undeniable. And in those moments, all the old stories come back. The baby laughter, the school recitals, the late-night fevers soothed with song. You remember who you were to them, and you wonder what you are now. Still, I woke up the next day, made my bed, watered the plants. Life continues even when people forget to witness it. And I continue even when no one is clapping. But just once, I wish one of them had remembered. Not because I need a celebration, not because I crave attention, but because that one small moment, a call, a message, a "Hey Mom, happy birthday" would have told me I still live in their hearts, not just their history. Her wedding was beautiful. At least that's what I told everyone afterward. The flowers were elegant, pale, and soft, like a memory you're afraid to disturb. The music was tasteful. The venue was modern and cold, all polished floors and delicate centerpieces. People smiled for pictures, clinked glasses, dabbed tears from their eyes, as if the day were a poem written just for joy. I wore a dress I hadn't touched in years, navy blue with lace at the sleeves, and a brooch that once belonged to my own mother. I fixed my hair carefully that morning, took my time with the lipstick. I sat on the edge of my bed for a while, before leaving, staring at the photograph of her, as a child, missing teeth cheeks, flushed, holding a dandelion she believed could grant wishes. She used to call me her best friend. No one saved me a seat near the front. I arrived early, thinking there might be a place set aside, but there was nothing. No name card, no special recognition. Just rows and rows of chairs filled with people I barely knew, chatting about catering and color themes. I found a seat in the back, not out of shame, but because that's where I fit now. On the edge. Present, but not central. I watched her walk down the aisle, and my breath caught, not because she was radiant, though she was, but because I remembered her first steps, her first scraped knee, her first heartbreak when a boy in middle school called her ordinary. I had held her through so many firsts. And now, in this room full of applause, I was a quiet observer, a shadow on the wall. She didn't look for me, not once. Her eyes scanned the crowd during the vows, the photos, the speeches, but they never landed on mine. I don't think she did it on purpose. She was caught up in the day, the rush, the meaning of it all, but I kept wondering if a single flicker of thought crossed her mind. Where's Grandma? Just 3 words, that's all. At the reception, I found a small table in the corner beside a wall sconce that flickered every few minutes. I nibbled politely at the food, smiled when people passed. Some relatives nodded at me. A few said how proud I must be. I said I was, and I meant it. But my pride was lined with ache, the kind that comes from being an afterthought. No one asked me to speak. I didn't expect to, but I'd written something just in case. A short blessing, gentle wise, full of all the things I've learned in a life of love and sacrifice. I kept it folded in my purse, smoothing it with my thumb throughout the night. I never took it out. Later, as the music swelled and the dancing began, I slipped outside. The air was cooler than I expected. I wrapped my shawl tighter and found a bench under a tree decorated with fairy lights. I sat there alone, listening to the muffled laughter inside. I thought about the wedding gift I gave her, a piece of jewelry passed down through generations, wrapped in velvet and quiet meaning. I don't know if she liked it. She never mentioned it. I stayed out there for a long time. No one came to find me. When the night ended, I left without saying goodbye. I didn't want to turn into a moment people had to manage. I didn't want pity or politeness. I just wanted to leave with what little grace I still had. The next morning, I made tea. The dress hung over the back of a chair, still carrying the scent of perfume and distance. I put the folded speech in a drawer. Maybe she'll read it one day. Maybe not. But I know what it said, and I know what it meant. She may not remember the woman who rocked her to sleep, who told her stories and brushed tangles from her hair. But I do. I remember everything. And sometimes memory is its own form of presence, quiet but enduring. The wedding was beautiful, but I left feeling more invisible than I ever have, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. No one looked for me. No one noticed I had gone. And that more than anything is what lingers. I stood in front of the stove last night, slowly frying tofu, just the way she used to like it, crisp on the edges, golden with a soft center, a splash of soy sauce, and scallions sizzling in the pan. The smell filled the kitchen like a memory unraveling in real time. I cooked the whole block even though I knew I wouldn't eat more than a few pieces. The rest I packed away. Maybe I'd give it to the neighbors, or maybe I'd keep it as if someone might knock on the door and say, "Mom, is that what I think I smell?" But no one knocked. Of course they didn't. They don't remember the meals I used to make, the way I'd rise early and prep 3 lunches before the sun finished stretching across the sky, the way I knew who hated which vegetable, the way I'd taste everything first just to be sure. Food was never just food. It was a question I asked over and over. Are you warm? Are you safe? Are you loved? And now it's what I do to fill the time, to pretend that someone still needs me. I used to imagine they'd inherit my recipes like heirlooms, that one day they'd call me from their kitchens, flour on their cheeks, asking Mom, "How did you get your dumplings to taste like that?" But that call never came. They order takeout now, post pictures of pasta in places I'll never visit. They laugh over brunches I'm not invited to. The kitchen was once our sacred space. Now it's a museum I walk through alone, touching memories no one else comes to see. I remember once my son brought a girl home. She was sweet, polite. I made a full meal, the kind that takes hours and heart. She took a few bites, smiled, and said, "Oh, I don't really eat much rice." My son just laughed. I did too. But inside something shriveled. Not because she didn't like it, that didn't matter, but because he didn't look over and say, "This is my favorite." Mom used to make it every Sunday. It was just food to them. But to me it was how I said everything I didn't know how to say out loud. It's strange the way love transforms when no one remembers how you gave it. Now I measure things differently, not in teaspoons or grams, but in silences, in how long it's been since someone ate with me, in how often I open the fridge and see leftovers that were never shared. They don't ask if I've eaten. Not really. Sometimes during rushed calls, they'll throw it in at the end like a period on a sentence. "Okay, talk soon, did you eat?" But they never wait for the answer. They've already moved on. It's a formality, a checkbox. What they don't understand is that the question itself used to be sacred. In our language, asking if someone has eaten is like asking if they're alive, if they're cared for, if they belong. It's more than hunger. It's about connection, presence, being seen. And now I sit at the table with 2 plates, one for memory, one for me. I eat slowly, chewing not just the food, but the silence. I wonder if they still remember what their favorite dish even was, if they'd recognize the taste of my hands. Once when they were young and sick, I stayed up all night making rice porridge, cooling it, feeding it by spoonful, wiping tears and sweat. Now I spoon soup into my own mouth alone. No one wipes my brow. No one watches to see if I'm eating enough. I've become the caretaker of ghosts. But still I cook, because it's how I love, because the smell of fried garlic reminds me of laughter, because soy sauce and sesame oil still hold stories no one else is telling, because I haven't forgotten, even if they have. I used to be strong, not just in the physical way, though I carried more groceries in one trip than anyone I knew, but in the kind of strength that doesn't show in mirrors. The strength of endurance, of holding everything together when it all threatened to come apart. I worked double shifts, took night classes, helped with homework after barely sleeping. I was the spine of this family, even when my own back ached from holding too much. But strength is a funny thing. When you show too much of it for too long, people stop seeing it as extraordinary. They start seeing it as expected, then required, and finally invisible. I remember a time when one of the kids fell during a school race. Bloodied knee, red face, pride shattered. I ran onto the field without hesitation. I picked them up in front of everyone, held them tight even as they tried to squirm away in embarrassment. They told me years later that moment stuck with them, how I was always there, always strong, always solid. But now I hold on to the walls when I walk. My knees creak with the betrayal of time. My hands shake when I lift the kettle. I catch my breath after climbing a few stairs, and no one sees it. Not because I hide it, I've stopped trying to pretend, but because they're not looking anymore. They assume I'm still the same, that I can still handle it all. They don't ask, "Do you need help, Mom?" They just breeze past me in conversation, assuming the woman who once stood through storms still doesn't mind the rain. The truth is, I miss being seen, not admired, just seen. I miss the days when someone noticed my fatigue and said, "Sit down, I'll take care of it." I miss having hands reach for mine, not out of obligation, but out of instinct. Now I try not to ask. I've learned the silence of pride. I push through pain because the alternative is admitting I can't do what I used to. And once you say it out loud, once you let the weakness show, you risk becoming a burden. That word hangs over me like fog burden, the thing every aging woman fears becoming. The title we're assigned quietly, without ceremony, without cruelty, just distance. One morning, I dropped a bowl. It slipped from my hands and shattered on the kitchen floor. I stood there barefoot, looking at the pieces, and suddenly felt like the bowl, once useful, once full of warmth, now broken. I cleaned it up slowly, careful not to cut myself, but something inside me had already split. I didn't tell anyone, not because I wanted to suffer alone, but because I knew no one would come. They'd text maybe, say, "Be careful, Mom," or "You should get those non-slip mats." But no one would show up with a broom and a soft voice. I used to be strong, and I still am in ways they can't see. I endure the ache of being forgotten. I navigate loneliness with quiet grace. I carry the weight of their childhoods in my bones. But I am tired, and I don't want to be praised for how well I hide it. I want someone to sit beside me and ask, "Do you still hurt?" I want them to notice when I wince getting out of the chair. I want them to see the effort it takes just to rise each day and not resent them for forgetting how I once held their world together. Strength is no longer about lifting what's heavy. It's about letting go of what no longer loves you back. It's about walking carefully, not just because your legs are weaker, but because your heart can't afford another fracture. And still I walk. I hold the rails. I take my time. I whisper, "You can do this the way I once whispered lullabies," because no one says it to me anymore. But I say it to myself, quietly, firmly, because I am still here. I never gave with conditions, not once. Every spoonful I fed them, every sleepless night, every birthday I stitched together with love and borrowed money, none of it was meant to be repaid. I didn't do it for gratitude. I did it because that's what love looks like when it grows in a mother's chest. It doesn't ask. It just gives. I remember holding them when they were small, their breaths warm against my collarbone, their hands no bigger than my palm. I never thought one day they'll owe me for this. I thought, let them be safe, let them be whole. And when they cried for me, I came running, always, no matter what I was doing. Even if my back ached, even if I hadn't eaten all day, I came. Because that's what mothers do. That's what I did. But now I sit in silence and wonder not why they don't repay me, but why kindness feels so far away. I don't need them to care for me like I cared for them. I don't need them to give me anything grand. I just want to feel that flicker of tenderness again, the kind that says, I remember who you are. I still see you. I've grown quiet in their absence, not bitter, not resentful, just still, like an old house no one visits anymore. I dust the corners. I open the windows. I keep it warm in case someone comes back. But more and more, I wonder if they remember the way home. Sometimes they send money, transfer it with a few typed words, just in case you need anything. I thank them, of course. I always do. But I'd trade it all for a moment of real attention. For one of them to sit across from me, hands around a cup of tea, and ask, "Are you okay, Mom?" And stay long enough to hear the answer, to really hear it. The world taught them to hustle, to chase, to build. I taught them that too, in a way. I didn't want them to struggle like I did. I encouraged them to aim higher, move faster, be stronger. But somewhere along the way, I think they mistook love for convenience, care for transactions. I don't fault them. Truly, I don't. I know how loud life gets, but I wish they understood that a mother's heart isn't a service to be dialed into. It's a well, deep, unending, quietly waiting to be seen for something more than utility. One of them once asked me, "Why don't you ever ask for help?" And I laughed, not because it was funny, but because they didn't see the irony. I never asked because I was always too busy giving, and now I stay quiet because I don't know if the asking would even be heard. The thing they'll never understand is that love, when given unconditionally for so long, begins to hunger for even the smallest return. Not repayment, not obligation, just assign a single glance of recognition, a question asked with gentleness, a visit that doesn't feel like a favor. I made them who they are, not just in blood and name, but in values, habits, the way they stir their coffee or smile when they're nervous. I see myself in them all the time, even when they no longer look back. But I'm learning now slowly that I have to mother myself, that I must turn that same care inward, the care I once poured into scraped knees and late-night fevers. Now I place it gently over my own aching heart. Tonight I'll make soup not because anyone's coming, but because I deserve something warm. I'll fold the laundry and place lavender in the drawer, not for guests, but for the quiet dignity of living alone. I'll tuck myself into bed and whisper, "You did enough today." And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough. There's a bitterness that lives beneath the surface now, not sharp or loud, but steady, like a small stone tucked in the lining of a shoe. You walk with it long enough, and you forget it's there. But sometimes when the silence stretches too far, or the chair across the table stays empty too long, it presses just enough to remind you, you are still carrying this. I don't rage. I don't slam things or shout into the void. That was never my way. I was raised to be quiet, to endure, to keep the peace, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. But sometimes I lie awake at night, the darkness soft around me, and I feel it, that quiet resentment I don't know what to do with. It's not because I want them to suffer. It's because I spent so many years making sure they didn't. I remember their colds, their heartbreaks, the time one of them failed a test and wouldn't come out of their room. I remember how I knocked, softly came in without a word, and just sat there rubbing their back in slow circles until the sobs eased. I remember the little ways I tried to say, "You're not alone," without even needing to speak. And now I sit in my own silence, wondering if any of that stayed with them, if any of it taught them how to care for someone when the world feels heavy. No one comes to rub my back. No one knocks on the door when I've gone quiet. They think I'm fine. Mom's always okay. It's become the story they tell themselves, that I'm unshakable, that I don't need, that I'll always be there. But I'm not a statue. I'm not made of stone. I am a woman, a person, a heart that's been worn down by the weight of holding everyone else's world. When I do speak, when I hint at my loneliness or say something like, "It's been quiet here," they change the subject, or laugh as if I'm joking, or say, "Well, you've always been so independent," as if independence is a reward, as if it means I never needed tenderness. The truth is, shouting wouldn't help. If I screamed, "I'm still here," I still feel, I still ache, and want, and hope they'd nod, feel guilty for a minute, and then return to their lives. So I stay silent, but not because I've accepted it, because I've grown tired of trying to be heard by people who aren't listening. Bitterness doesn't make you cruel. It makes you quiet, careful. It makes you build walls in places you once left open. I used to wait for them to show up. Now I make tea for one. I used to leave the porch light on. Now I switch it off by habit. There's a drawer in my kitchen with old cards, scribbled crayon I love yous, glittery birthday notes, messy, sorry mom letters. I keep them all, not because I'm sentimental, but because they remind me that once they knew how to love me without forgetting me. Sometimes I think about mailing those cards back to them. No note, no explanation, just a memory in an envelope. A way of saying you knew how once. Do you still? But I don't. I just read them sometimes slowly, like sacred texts from a lost religion. Each letter a relic of a time when love was loud and obvious and freely given. Now I get polite nods, brief calls, occasional gifts. It's enough to fool the world, but not enough to fool a mother's heart. Still I rise each day. I open the curtains. I water the plants. I talk to the neighbor's cat as if he's mine. I keep my home gentle in case kindness ever decides to walk through the door again. Because even beneath the bitterness, I still believe in love, even now, even after everything. That's what makes it hurt. I've come to realize that motherhood is not a transaction. It's not a contract sealed with baby powder and lullabies expecting return on investment decades later. I didn't carry them for 9 months, nurse them through fevers, or work late into the night sewing loose buttons so that one day they'd pay me back. That was never the point. But when the silence stretches long, when birthdays are missed, when I become someone they only text when something's wrong, it's hard not to feel like an unpaid debt. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just lingers, like a room you never quite finish cleaning. I never wanted them to keep score. I never wanted them to feel guilt. I just wanted them to see me the way I always saw them, even when they didn't know it, even when they thought I wasn't looking. I gave them everything without keeping receipts. I didn't count the nights I didn't sleep, the meals I skipped, the tears I swallowed. I didn't track the hours I spent waiting in cars outside school functions or the times I made excuses for their behavior because they were just having a hard week. That was love, pure, undiluted, given freely. And if I could go back, I'd do it all again. But I suppose I believed that kind of love would echo. I thought one day they'd turn to me not because they needed something, but because they missed me. Because they'd feel a tug at their chest and wonder what I was doing. Because they'd remember that home wasn't just a place, but a person who loved them without end. Instead, I've become background, the thing that's always there until it's not. They'll say I'm strong, generous, selfless, and maybe I am. But I'm also tired of being remembered only in moments of crisis, tired of being the name they scroll past before calling someone else, tired of being the history that supports their present but isn't invited into their future. Sometimes I dream of disappearing, not forever, not dramatically, just long enough for them to notice, to wonder, to realize that I wasn't a fixture, but a person, that the woman who never asked for anything might have wanted something after all. Once I forgot to reply to a message for 2 days. When I finally responded, one of them said, "Wow, I thought something happened." And I wanted to say, something does happen. Every day. To me. You just don't ask. But I didn't. I sent a smiley face instead, because that's what they're used to, the version of me that never pushes, never demands, never says, "I'm lonely." But inside I'm quietly rebelling, not with anger, but with truth. I've stopped trying to make it easier for them. If they forget a birthday, I don't pretend they didn't. If they cancel a visit, I don't say it's okay. I let the silence settle. I let the absence speak for itself. Because motherhood may not be a transaction, but it isn't a one-way street either. Even wells run dry. Even givers need to be held sometimes. And though I'll never ask them to pay me back, not for the years, not for the labor, not for the nights I rocked them while my own body ached, I will ask for presence, for kindness, for care that isn't an afterthought. I gave them the map, the compass, the light. I showed them what love looks like in its rawest form, and if they've forgotten the way back to that, I won't beg them to remember. But I will keep the door unlocked. Not wide open, not anymore, but unlocked, just in case. Because maybe one day they'll remember that love is not measured by how much is given, but by how much is returned, even in the smallest ways. A call, a touch, a question asked with real eyes. How are you today? They tell their friends I'm independent, that I'm doing great, that I don't need anything, that I've always been strong. I hear it sometimes in passing during a rushed call, or when I meet one of their acquaintances at the market who says, "Your son always says you're amazing living on your own and all." I smile, of course. I nod, but inside something clenches. They think independence is the same as happiness. They think because I don't call crying, because I don't ask for money, because I keep the garden tidy and the house in order, that I am fine, that I am fulfilled, that I don't want anything more. But independence was never my goal. It was my last resort. It was what I learned when leaning became too lonely. When I stopped asking for rides because it was always inconvenient. When I stopped mentioning appointments because I didn't want to rearrange their lives. When I stopped cooking extra food because no one came to eat it. That's how independence was born, not from strength, but from silence. They wear my autonomy like a badge, as if my solitude is a sign of my success. But they don't see that every strong woman was once someone who waited for someone else to notice her tired hands and aching back, and waited in vain. I don't need their money. I don't need them to do my laundry or buy my groceries, but I do need to feel seen, to feel like my life still has a place in theirs, that I am not just a name on a list of to-dos, but a living, breathing soul who once taught them how to love. Because being independent doesn't mean being emotionless. It doesn't mean I don't sit by the window some evenings and wonder, will anyone call today? It doesn't mean I don't long to hear someone say, "Mom, I miss you," in a voice that doesn't sound like they're already halfway to somewhere else. They say, "You're amazing, Mom. You've got everything under control," as if being forgotten gracefully is a skill worth praising. But I didn't raise them so I could become a monument to endurance. I raised them to know that love is reciprocal, that caring doesn't expire, that strength doesn't mean never needing help. It means trusting someone enough to ask. Sometimes I do test them gently. I'll say something like, "It's been a little lonely this week," and wait. Usually the response is something like, Mom, you should go out more," or "You should join a group." Never. "Do you want me to come over?" Never. "Let's talk for a while." It's like I've been so good at surviving that they've forgotten I need more than breath to feel alive. I need laughter in my kitchen again. I need voices other than the radio. I need someone to ask, not just once, not just in passing, but genuinely. How was your day? That question, it has so much power, so much grace. It doesn't cost them anything, and yet it gives me something to hold on to, a thread back to the world. I didn't choose independence to be noble. I chose it because asking felt like begging, and I'm too proud to beg my own children for scraps of attention. But don't mistake my quiet for contentment. Don't mistake my solitude for peace. There's a part of me that still waits, a part of me that sets an extra place at the table, even if just in my mind, a part of me that hopes one of them will come, not because I asked, but because they wanted to. I want to believe that I am not invisible, that somewhere in their busy minds there's a flicker of memory of hands that held of meals, that healed of lullabies sung in the dark, that will pull them back to me, not in emergency, but in love. Until then, I carry on. I pay my bills. I water my plants. I live my days with quiet dignity. But I will never stop hoping that independence is not the final chapter. That connection, however small, might still come. Even the strongest roots thirst for rain. Sundays used to mean something. They used to carry a rhythm, the sound of chopping onions oil sizzling in the pan, feet shuffling in the hallway. The children waking late, hair messy, yawning into the smell of rice and ginger, and the sweet, slow comfort of home. Back then, Sundays were ours, a sacred space between duty and school, between pressure and growing up. They were for gathering, for being. I'd start preparing before anyone else stirred, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It was my offering warmth, in the form of food love, in the form of time. I made their favorites, set the table just so, turned on the old radio with that soft crackle that made the whole kitchen hum. And when they sat down, messy, sleepy, still a little annoyed with each other from the night before, everything softened. We didn't always say the right things. There were arguments, slammed doors, occasional sulking. But the food always brought us back. One bite in and the silence would break. Someone would laugh. Someone else would ask for seconds. I can still hear the way they scraped their spoons against their bowls, the way they'd sneak a bite from a sibling's plate when they weren't looking. And now Sundays are quiet, too quiet. I still wake early, out of habit more than necessity. I boil water for tea. I peel fruit. I look at the stove and wonder what would happen if I made a full meal their meal. Would anyone come? Would they even remember what it used to taste like? I sit by the window and watch the world go by. Neighbors hosting barbecues, families piling into cars for outings, laughter echoing down the street from a yard I don't belong to. I could go somewhere, I suppose. There are community events, groups for seniors, church potlucks. But it's not the same. I don't want new conversations. I want old ones to return. I want one of them to call on a Saturday night and say, "What are you cooking tomorrow, Mom?" Or better yet, "We'll come by, don't make too much." I want to hear their steps in my hallway again. I want to set the table for more than one. Instead, I warm leftover rice, add a fried egg, a splash of soy sauce. I eat in silence, the fork clinking gently against the plate. Sometimes I pretend I'm not alone, that they're just sleeping in, that they'll stumble out of the guest room any minute, rubbing their eyes and saying, "What smells so good?" But no one comes. The rooms stay quiet. The guest bed remains made. The plates in the cupboard stay stacked. I've stopped setting the table for more than one. It felt too much like waiting, and waiting over time becomes a kind of wound. They don't mean harm. I tell myself that often. They're just busy. Life pulls them in different directions: work, kids, errands, obligations. And Sunday becomes just another day, just another square on the calendar that passes without ceremony. But to me, it was never just a day. It was a ritual, a reunion, a way to remind ourselves that love didn't always have to be declared. It could be cooked, served, eaten together. It could be passed in silence between chopsticks and shared bowls. Now I watch the clock out of habit. 10 o'clock, 11, noon. Still no call, still no knock. I clean up quietly, tuck the uneaten fruit into the fridge, pour another cup of tea. I turn on the radio, but it doesn't sound the same without the laughter that used to fill in the spaces between songs. There is something sacred in being remembered on the days that don't demand it. Not birthdays, not holidays, just an ordinary Sunday, the kind we used to build our lives around. I don't need a grand gesture. I don't need flowers or gifts. I just want someone to say, "I was thinking about you, Mom. What are you up to today?" That would be enough. That would carry me through another week of empty chairs and folded napkins. Because Sundays still mean something to me. They always will. Even if I eat alone, I set the tea gently. I cook with care. I remember. And somewhere deep in the silence, I hope they do too. I'm still here, still warm. That's the part no one seems to understand. They look at me and see age-gray hair, slower steps, a voice softer than it used to be. But beneath it all, I'm still full of stories, full of feelings, full of a kind of fire that never left. It just got quieter. I have dreams still. Small ones, yes, but dreams all the same. I want to see the sea again. I want to sit on a bench under a jacaranda tree in full bloom. I want someone to tell me about their day, not out of obligation, but out of affection. I want a hand to hold during a movie. I want to laugh without it echoing back as loneliness. They treat me like I'm fading, like I'm already gone, but still taking up space. Like a photograph that's been on the wall too long, noticed, less glanced at without thought. But I am not a relic. I am not a shadow. I am here. I open the windows each morning and feel the sun on my skin. I smell the jasmine blooming just outside. I hum songs no one listens to anymore. I still tear up at beautiful things, a child's laugh on the street, a handwritten note tucked in a library book, the way rain sounds on the roof after a long, dry spell. I still remember how to love. I still cook as if someone's coming. I still fold towels like someone will use them. I still wipe the table clean like a guest might arrive. Because part of me still hopes not out of desperation, but out of faith, a quiet, stubborn belief that presence is not lost, only paused. I hear them talk sometimes when we do speak. They talk about how I'm low maintenance, how I never ask for anything, how I seem content. They don't see the longing. Not because I hide it, but because they're not looking for it. They assume silence equals peace, but sometimes silence is just the space left after too many unanswered questions. Once, when I was younger, I told myself I'd never become one of those older women who sit by the window waiting for life to come back. And yet here I am, not because I lost my way, but because I gave so much of my path to others that I forgot to mark my own. I want them to come back, not to rescue me, not to apologize, just to be here, to bring their noisy energy, their laughter, their ordinary stories that fill a house with life. I want them to remember that I'm not just doing fine, I'm still living, I'm still aching for connection, still hoping someone will knock on the door, not because I asked, but because they remembered. Once a neighbor's little boy wandered over and knocked on my door, just curious, just exploring. I opened it and smiled, and he looked up at me and said, "Are you someone's grandma?" I knelt down and nodded, blinking back tears. "Yes, I am." It hit me so suddenly, the weight of that title. Grandma. Not just a word, a world, a legacy, a role stitched into the bones of everything I've ever done. But even titles fade when no one uses them. Now I whisper it to myself sometimes. Mom, grandma, woman, like a mantra, a reminder. Because I haven't disappeared. I still dream. I still feel. I still carry the love that built this family, in every wrinkle, in every quiet chore, in every moment of soft hope. I may walk slower now, my hands may tremble when I pour the tea, but the warmth, it's still there. They just have to knock. I didn't need their money. I never did. I never wanted fancy gifts or big gestures. I never measured love in dollars or things. I measured it in time, in presence, in words that came without prompting, and glances that said, "I see you." I would have traded every envelope they've handed me, every transfer labeled for groceries, for one honest moment of connection, one sentence asked with care. "Mom, have you eaten?" That question, so small, so easy to overlook, but to me it's everything. Because it doesn't just mean hunger. It means attention, concern. It means you crossed their mind. It means they thought about you at a time when they didn't have to. It means they still remember that you exist beyond the tasks, beyond the favors, beyond the history. Once one of them did ask. It was years ago. I remember it clearly, not because the meal mattered, but because the tone did. They'd called in the middle of the day. No reason. Just wanted to hear my voice, they said. We talked about nothing and everything. And then before hanging up, they asked it quietly, tenderly. "Mom, have you eaten?" I don't even remember what I said. Probably yes, but I remember how it felt. Like a blanket being draped over my shoulders, like someone turning the porch light back on after all these years. It only happened once. Now they send money instead. A gift card. A food delivery dropped at the door. It's efficient, modern, thoughtful maybe, but it lacks presence. It feels like a transaction. Like they're outsourcing care. Like they're checking a box so they won't feel guilty later. And me, I say thank you. I always say thank you. But what I want, what I crave, is the simplicity of being seen in my most human form, not as someone who needs financial help, not as someone still doing well on her own, but as a mother, a person, a heart that still beats for their voices. It's not the food I miss, it's the moment, the small sacred intimacy of being asked something out of love, the slow pause, the warmth behind the words. They don't understand how quiet life becomes when you live alone, how time stretches like taffy, and how even the most mundane exchange can be the thing that keeps your soul upright. When no one asks about your meals, it's not just the food that's missing, it's the proof that someone is still walking alongside you, even from afar. I imagine what it would be like if one of them called tomorrow. No reason, just to talk. And then at the end paused and said, "Mom, have you eaten?" and meant it. I imagine I'd lie again. Say yes, even if I hadn't. Not to deceive them, but because the question itself would have fed me more than any meal. I didn't need their support. I never expected it. But I wanted their attention, their curiosity, their small, unassuming kindness. Not the kind you post online or send with flowers, but the kind that fits into a single sentence and lands straight on the heart. Because after all these years, after all the giving and worrying and waiting, it wasn't the sacrifices that left me hollow. It was the forgetting. And that one question, so ordinary, so soft, would have been the thing that reminded me I still lived in their world, Mom, have you eaten? That's all I ever needed. So now I sit in the soft quiet of my home, the light falling low across the floor, and I breathe a little slower. The dishes are done, the curtains drawn. There's a pot of tea on the table, still warm, and me still here. I don't carry rage, that's too heavy. I carry memory. I carry hope, faded but intact. I carry the ache of love, given without return, but I carry it gently now, like something fragile, worn thin at the edges, but still beautiful in its own way. I no longer wait at the window. I no longer rehearse what I'll say if they call. I've let go of those small, aching rehearsals. Instead, I rise in the morning and give myself what they forgot to kindness, a little patience, a little grace. I eat alone, yes, but I eat slowly, mindfully, as if I'm still worth the warmth. I set the table not for company, but for dignity. I light a candle because I can. And when the silence grows too long, I hum to myself old songs, soft ones, full of memory. Because I was never asking for much. Not help, not money, not grand gestures. Just the smallest proof that I'm still loved. That someone somewhere paused and thought, I wonder if Mom has eaten. That kind of love doesn't cost a thing, but it means everything. So I carry on. Not bitter, just quieter now. Still full of love, still setting places for the memories. Still warm, still here.